Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Prose Notes, a graduate writing podcast. I hope everyone is enjoying this dreary day. It's dreary here, but whenever you're listening to it, it's probably beautiful. The sun is shining. Today, Nolan. Hi, Nolan.
Hi, Samantha.
It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you again. Yeah.
We are joined by a very special guest, Quentin Jarrell. Quentin, how's it going?
It's going good. Thank you for having me on. It's good to meet both of you.
Hell yeah. So Quentin, for those of you who don't know, is the first place winner and the People's Choice Award winner for the 3-minute thesis competition. Every year, KU offers this chance for graduate students across the university to present their thesis or research or dissertation in 3 minutes. And
Which is wild.
It's wild. It's a very cool program. If you haven't checked out the 3-minute thesis competition before, please go check it out. Some of the presentations are incredible. The research that's being done at KU is just chef's kiss. I love working with the students who are working on the 3-minute thesis competition. And so I was absolutely delighted, Quentin, when you were like, yeah, I'll come on the podcast. So as we kind of get into our interview today, because we're going to ask Quentin kind of about his grad school journey, the research he's doing, and of course, for a writing podcast, we're going to ask about your writing process and kind of how you think about writing and research in your field. Quentin, your research, I guess your 3-minute thesis presentation was entitled Unraveling Our Genetic Puzzle. Can you tell me a little bit more about your research?
Yeah, I'd love to. Okay, so I am a bioengineering student, and I'm working in a chemistry lab. Ooh. Just to set the background.
Yeah.
And so the lab consists of a lot of chemistry students, but as well as some engineers.
Okay.
So it's a broad range of backgrounds. And so why that matters is what I'm doing is engineering focused. So I'm building a device, but it's used in more of a chemistry application.
Okay.
And so that application is sequencing DNA and RNA.
Excellent.
And all that means is that it's looking at kind of the building blocks that make up the DNA and RNA. And that helps us find out important information about, your health, who you are, what you're like. And so I titled it Unraveling the Genetic Puzzle because kind of we are literally and metaphorically looking at the different pieces in the puzzle that make up people.
I'm going to give you an award for first place for now condensing your 3-minute thesis competition speech even more. So here you go. First place award. Da, 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 da.
I knew what most of those words meant. I could track with all of that.
And what's really interesting to me about your work is it's fundamentally interdisciplinary. Like you are an engineer, you're a bioengineer working in the chemistry lab, and you are living the dream. You're doing what other grad students want to do, which is interdisciplinary research.
Thank you. It is very interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
It has to be. And I think my lab especially has done a really good job of combining those things. That's something we try to drive home, and that's why I know the lab wants students from different backgrounds.
That's awesome.
Helps.
Research is kind of the foundation of what we do here at KU, especially as graduate students, as we're becoming burgeoning scholars. But it had to start somewhere. Were you a tiny boy who dreamed of unraveling the genetic puzzle?
No.
Well, so why'd you go to grad school?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So I was not. I mean, I initially got into engineering. My dad is an engineer, and he pushed me to it. My mom is not, but she did as well. I think it's a good place for anyone to start out that's just curious about how things work, want to apply themselves to problem solving in maybe some different interesting fields. For me, it just started as a way to expand kind of beyond the classroom. I was fortunate to be pushed that direction by some people. Some of my professors recommended it, and my freshman year, I reached out to a couple people, and then by my sophomore year, there was kind of space that had opened up in a lab. I started exploring.
Oh, so sophomore year of undergrad.
Sorry,
you
yeah,
were
I should
like,
specify.
Whoa, okay. So
That's really cool, yeah.
Yeah, you were really starting to like branch out probably before many of your peers even.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, there's a range of times people get involved. So yeah, I should specify sophomore of undergrad,
Yeah.
which I also did at KU.
Cool.
And then it's a whole other story, but COVID came in
Yeah.
and basically stopped everything I was doing.
Okay.
So long story short, the reason I got involved was I was interested in just kind of the topic of original discovery, right? I'm learning all this stuff. What do I do with it? How do I apply it? I'm kind of into problem solving. People tell me that problem solving is a big component of doing academic research, and I decided to explore it.
Hell yeah.
That was the long story short, basically.
So then, coming off that, did you like discover grad school when you came to KU, or was that a thing you had heard about earlier in your life? Did it like influence do you think it influenced your like choice to pursue grad school then?
When I came to KU for undergrad or grad?
Yeah, for undergrad.
Yes. So I had no grad school aspirations coming into undergrad.
Right.
And actually, I guess I can tell this story to be apt time. My junior year of undergrad, during an advising appointment, one of my professors, she and I had some sort of working relationship just from being in her classes, and she said, you might want to look into this. I know you do research in this other lab, and you've demonstrated enough in the classroom where you have the ability to go and do research, and not everyone finds themselves drawn to that.
Yeah.
But you should go and check it out, basically.
Yeah.
And so I did, basically with the intent of discovering, is research right for me? And that's what I've been working on for 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
But
Is
then
it
that was
right?
kind of the like aha moment, or of like, this is maybe a thing I can actually do.
Did you talk to those like grad students in the lab, down the hallway that your professor had like gestured you to? I guess my question is like, what kind of advice were you getting from grad students that you were talking to at that time?
Great question. Okay. So a wide range of advice, and I think anyone going to grad school or considering should do exactly that.
Yes,
Try to get as much advice as you can.
Yeah.
The best piece of advice that I got was have a reason for doing it.
Okay.
I think most graduate students know that and agree with it. And yeah, that was the best piece of advice I got. Whether you want to do research, you want to find out if research is right for you, or you have this specific topic you really know and love, you want to research. Examples like that are what people told me to have going in. And for me, the answer was, well, I didn't get to do research much during undergrad. COVID shut it down. So I'm going to go and find out if it's right for me.
Hell yeah. Does it feel right for you right now in this moment?
I think it was definitely the right choice for me.
Cool.
It has given me the ability to get involved, and I've been very fortunate to find a good lab that has, it's given me the chance to find out what a research environment is like in academia, which was the right choice for me.
Right.
For sure.
I had one grad student in undergrad who I have a distinct memory of telling me not to go to grad school. I was like, I'm going to go to grad school. And he was like, don't do it. And I didn't listen to him. And I'm happy where I am right now, but I always remember that one guy.
It's always the butterfly. What if?
What if I had listened to that one dude? Nolan had you had basically grad school aspirations
Since I was a kid.
From a wee lad.
I learned about what it was. I was really into paleontology as a kid. And I was like, doctor, what's that, Mom? And she explained the concept, and I was like, I'm going to get that one day. Aww. I don't care what it is, but I'm going to get one of those degrees one day. And here I am. And yeah, I mostly had people say, have a reason and think about why you're doing it. And this isn't on the list, but I think it's an interesting question then related to that. So then, are you planning an industry career, academic career? little bit of both? What do you think, anyways? You're not committing to anything right now.
So I am planning on going into industry. I think I have a unique journey. I actually just recently finished up the PhD application process, and I've been in Lawrence for 6 years, and I'm in a great lab, and KU is a good school, but I would definitely want to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so I started the PhD application process with that in mind, applied to a number of schools. I got into one, actually, and found a good match in a lab, but I ended up turning it down. I want to go to industry, and I think, just a number of factors played into that, which I can expand on.
Yeah, go for
if
it.
interested. Okay.
I am interested.
Yeah.
But only what you feel like you want to. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So the driving factor, I think, behind my decision to go to industry was, I didn't have that reason anymore.
Okay, yeah.
So, I enjoy doing research, and I'm happy in my master's. I think I made the right decision.
Yeah.
Having the opportunity to explore if it's right for me. But when I talk to people doing PhDs, when I talk to people at the potential school I was going to go to, they all expressed, I think, strong reasons. I want to run a laboratory one day.
Yeah.
I know I want to. In this case, I would have done more biomechanics, like clinical focused research. I want to, be working in a hospital, running a research lab. I want to work, with patients and run my own experiments. And for me, the pull to research was not that strong.
Yeah.
I enjoy it, and I could see myself having some part of my career in it. But, 10, 20 years down the line, I think I will branch out in other directions.
Yeah.
So a PhD, I don't think would have brought the benefit to my life compared to the cost of doing it. So
What a healthy mindset.
cost benefit analysis.
Super healthy mindset for
Thank you.
for our listeners who are currently in master's programs. Please
Cost
listen.
benefit analysis
Listen.
is
Master's,
Quentin.
great ROI, PhD. It really does just, and I think that's a good thing, because what's even in that is, like, if you want to, in a couple years, go back, like, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
And in your work, you might discover a new reason for wanting to, pursue that next level. So, I think that's really, really wonderful.
Yeah. Beautiful. Sorry. It's so wonderful to talk to somebody who, like, truly knows themselves. And I mean that sincerely. Like, I know I'm laughing about it, but it is really nice.
But I think that's the thing, like, in, like, graduate school is, like, that pressure to do the next thing and always climbing that ladder, but, like, knowing your exit point and being comfortable and confident with that is I think is really good for people to hear, because I think we all feel a lot of that pressure. And so I really commend you just for, like, knowing why you're here. And I think that's a hard thing.
It's hard. And a lot of people use graduate school to find themselves. So there's still that, like, lack of clarity throughout this learning period. And also, like, most people go to grad school when they're in their early 20s, which our brain's not done developing. So, like, there are all these like factors that play into what is my next step, who am I, and, like, how does that fit into my journey. But this next question, I feel like it may be a little interesting for you just because you've been at KU since undergrad. Why did you choose KU for grad school, and did you apply to any other schools for grad school? Or did you just, like, immediately want to go to KU?
Department internal kind of,
I did apply to other schools.
Okay.
So I had, coming out of undergraduate, I applied to a number of schools for masters. And I had a couple different options. And I'll just plug a little master's advice here. If anyone going through it.
Yeah.
So a big thing in the master's program is there's a variety of master's programs. Master of Science is one thing you can do. That's what I'm doing. I'm 2 years. I'm writing a thesis. There's Master of Engineering, which is typically more like 1 year. You don't really write a thesis, depending on the school, just coursework. I wanted a little more research focus. So that helped me discriminate some of the schools I got into.
Gotcha.
KU was Master of Science, some were Master of Engineering. And then it also, what helped me decide is opportunity. This is a very real factor. A lot of schools aren't going to give you support in a master's program.
Yep.
And KU, I was very fortunate. They were able to offer support to master's students, which was a big draw to me. That's a huge factor in getting my master's because I don't want to come out, in debt.
A bunch of money.
It's not all money, but consider it.
It's an absolutely huge factor, and there are a lot of graduate students who, because they want to do research, take the non-funded positions, and I think it's really insidious. Departments, stop doing that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get in trouble.
No, but like it's that real thing. Like even like, and there's lots of ways you can get money, right? Where there's either work for you built in and they pay you that, but the one you're wanting to aim for is like some amount of tuition coverage plus like that money, and it's hard to say no, like when it is a thing like you've wanted, and like you're like, I'll just do it and I'll just make it work, but like really consider the money. I don't think people realize what it is, especially because when you're applying to lots of schools, like you might be heading out of state, and that adds a whole nother layer of cost because you did yours out of state, I did as well, and it's just a whole different thing. And so it's like the money thing is it's really real, perhaps even more than undergrad.
Yeah, and a lot of schools are in places with high cost of living. Yeah, because
especially the really good ones.
Yeah, people want to live there. Well, yeah. So you've been part of KU for a long time at this point. Do you feel like you are part of the KU community? Do you feel like you're more a part of like bioengineering or your chemistry lab? Like, where do you feel like you fit into the larger community?
I think that's an interesting question and a hard one to answer because so much of me feels split between different pieces. On the one hand, I did undergrad here. So I made my friends, made my acquaintances, had my little life set up. And then switching to graduate school for 2 years, it's like a whole different world. Yeah. And everywhere I walk around, I'm seeing like, oh, I used to do such and such here with so-and-so,
Yeah.
So I feel a little like split in that way. But I've still met new people and I've done new things and some, take advantage of some opportunities in graduate school that I didn't have. At the same time, I'm in the School of Engineering in the bioengineering program at KU. It's a program as opposed to a department. Cool. But, I know people in engineering. I know bioengineers, other types of engineers. And then I work in the chemistry building in a chemistry lab. So at that same time, I feel a split there also. But, I think when you're in your a niche area, let's say, the bioengineering program, you're able to find your groove, I should put it. People you're around, the things you do, your routines you get down. I think you can find that anywhere personally. And for KU, it was hard for me at first because I was like, everything's changed for this place that I knew for 4 years, but I was able to find it. And I think you can do it.
KU is definitely in the process of recovering from the pandemic. I feel like we're still feeling, and because we talked to a lot of graduate students, that like internal fracture of like a lot of graduate students feel like they don't have community within their own departments because the pandemic really kind of broke things up in a way that hasn't recovered. So I'm glad that you're feeling well, you like went through all of it and it's on the up and up now. You like found your community again.
But yeah, and then I think it's just really interesting, right, to like be like a rock jock undergrad and like plugged into the community, and I think that's really good. But just in the transition to like grad school and the master's is like, it's like, like I don't go to these buildings, like I'm in my 3 homes on campus, like, and coming from out of state and coming to a PhD program, like I've got like 2 places I go and I just don't know the rest of campus, and I don't know that I really will because there's no impetus to, like, there's so many other things in my life going on that like it's really hard to have the time to like maintain those things. So to that extent, I am glad to hear that like you still are integrated, and I guess the reason I say that is because related to my like research interest in higher ed of like how do graduate school programs like socialize their students kind of into the community, because I think there's a lot more that we could be doing. And then it's just really interesting to have a case where you were here, but then things kind of changed a bit. Yeah.
I will say, I love what you said about you have your little 2-3 homes on
Yeah.
campus.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge difference. Graduate school compared to undergrad. Undergrad, I was moving and shaking,
Yeah.
going places.
Yeah.
And graduate school, I have a couple places I go, and it's those places every day.
Yeah.
Grinding, you know.
Yeah. When was the last time you were in Budig? Right now.
Today. It's the first time in years.
Yeah.
And so, kind of coming off that, how much do you feel like your like hobbies connect to your research and scholarship? Whether it's in terms of just like you feeling personally connected to what you're doing, like hopefully you're interested, and it sounds like you're interested in what you're doing, but there's this broad scope of who you are as the person. So what's kind of that overlap between the two?
I'd say there's some overlap. For me, I'd say this is how I think it's always been, even, you know, coming up during school. You know, a lot of that for me is separate, and I think that works for me.
Yeah.
That's healthy. That's how I like it. I'm interested in what I do, and when I come and I make progress or don't make progress a lot of times, everyone knows how it is.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, I find what I'm doing interesting, but to me at least, that's a lot of that is separate from my other interests.
Okay.
So I enjoy big sports guy. Let's go Chiefs. I enjoy physical activity, working out. I actually, since undergrad, I've played on the club soccer team here,
Oh, cool.
Whoa.
which is
Kudos.
a lot of fun. Thank you.
That's awesome.
It honestly, I feel like having stuff like that keeps
Yeah.
me sane because it's like another world. It's like I have these like 2 or 3 homes that I live at, and then a few times a week I get to put on a completely different hat. I get to go and do something.
Uniform.
Yeah. Sorry.
No,
Uniform.
you're right.
I get to go and do something I love and completely disconnected from research.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I have a few of my hobbies are like that. It's I get to go do something else that keeps me sane.
Yeah, that's so important. I feel like at this point in my life, I feel like I want some overlap between my hobbies and my work, but there are certainly things that like I am absolutely okay with a healthy separation or like a healthy barrier or boundary between the two, because you need time to unplug, you need time to disconnect, I'm using a lot of technology metaphors, but I guess that's where we're at.
But no, like, and again, like with the pressures of graduate school, and it can depend on like the department or program culture, but right, to always be plugged in, like there's always more research you could do. There's
Yeah,
always a new
yeah.
article you could read. And it's like, nah, man, I'm going to go home and do it. I'm going to do this own thing for like an
Yeah.
hour and a half, 2 hours, because you just need that. And
Yeah.
so again, kudos to you, I think, for like having the presence of mind to say like, this is my life here and I like it and it's interesting. And when I'm not doing that, I'm going to be doing my thing.
Yeah.
Because I think lots of grad students struggle to even like realize that that's an okay thing for them to do.
Yeah. Well, because the pressure is endemic to the work that we do. In that note, what were some of the biggest shocks for you going from undergrad to your graduate program?
So I think the first one is how your life is structured. It feels like, to me, it feels like I just work a job. It feels like I have a 9 to 5, 9 to something else,
Yeah.
9 to a little bit later than 5 most days. But it feels like I have a job,
Yeah.
and I go and I do my job, and on the side I do classes, and on the side I go to seminar and do this and that. So it's a different structure is the first thing I'd say. Second thing I'd say is I think a lot of people have this opinion, and it's that I'm good at school and I'm going to go to grad school. And and that for me, I was a good student.
Yep.
And so people pushed me toward this. I thought I could be good at this. I could enjoy it, and I did it. And it's not school. It's different than school.
Yeah, it's not school.
Yeah.
It's different in a lot of ways. A lot of it is original discovery. And I want to, say that is, at least for me, that's been in contrast to a lot of what school was, which was, studying, repetition, and, speaking from an engineering standpoint, problem solving when you were given a lot of the variables, right?
Yes,
You just had to be able to take what you were given,
Yeah.
know where you needed to plug those things in,
Right.
and you came to a conclusion.
Yeah.
Not always that straightforward, but that is in stark contrast to what research, again, from an engineering standpoint, is
Yeah.
like now. And it's, you don't have all the variables. You
Yeah.
have to go and find them. And when you go and do that, 97% of the time you're
Yeah.
going to fail.
Yeah.
And then you basically are like, okay, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like, what's not working today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the question I always ask myself. But that's just how it is. Like, that's the point, is that's what you're trying to discover.
Yeah.
So
And it's
that's the biggest thing for me. And
no,
Go ahead.
I love this idea of like original discovery is failure, because this is something that I felt with my own research. We talked to a lot of graduate students about this issue of like, I'm not feeling like I'm making progress, but that's because you're doing original, like you're trying to find solutions to problems that like those solutions aren't out there. It's not a test that you have to just find the right answer. Like you are the one finding the answer in the, needle in a haystack kind of thing. So
Yeah, and it's just I don't think the problem is made worse by it. Right? We only see the articles where there is that original discovery, and we don't see an article about the regression I ran that didn't work or didn't,
we only
come up with it. We only see like the product that worked in the end, and so like that's a good piece of advice for anyone listening. Like it's a process, and you're gonna miss a lot of the time, and that's okay.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of like a shadow CV?
I have not.
So a shadow CV is it's this idea of like the CV of your failures. So it's the grants you didn't get. It's the articles that didn't get published. It's the experiments that like never went anywhere. And I think this is something that more faculty members are trying to do, to highlight that like invisible work that doesn't get published. But yeah, I always think of like, what's my shadow CV? What's on my shadow CV? There's a lot of stuff on my shadow CV, but
I think like related to this idea, like it honestly has influenced like the work I do. Like lots of what I do or plan to do is very qualitative. And like what's really cool about qualitative is unless you've interviewed that person about that exact topic, it's inherently new. So at least there's that. And but also I think it's just interesting to see the difference between like STEM, humanities, and then kind of a social science kind of realm, like seeing the relations, but then how it's very different between each of the different kind of like disciplines. Yeah. It's just neat.
That's really cool.
I did have a quick question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So that's something I had wondered about. I am in a big echo chamber. I'm surrounded by engineers and chemists and stuff like that. And I was thinking, how would I, quantify the rate at which you do experiments and you don't get results, 90-some%. And I had a question. How does that differ when you're not in STEM? Like, do you quote unquote like fail as often? Do you need to go back and revise? Do you work with someone or something and it doesn't go as planned and you need to redo it? I was just curious about that.
That's a great question. And Nolan, feel free to jump in.
Yeah.
So for me, I find that the research we do in the humanities tends to, like, at a very foundational level, it's about the connections that we make in the world and how strong or weak those connections are. So research looks like a lot of reading, a lot of like taking notes and trying to make sense of the ideas and the theories and what the scholars are saying about a particular topic. And what original research looks like, at least for the humanities, sometimes it's like, well, no one's ever said this before. And then you have to justify why that's important to people. Sometimes it's what no one said this before. Sometimes it's that like this topic has been really well examined, but we've missed something. So like we've missed a population, or we've missed a particular identity group that like this is a really important thing for us to consider in relation to them. And it's weird because I wouldn't say there's like failure. It's not like I'm finding the wrong answers, but my research is always constantly trying to convince other people that this is real and important. And I know that's sometimes why the humanities get a bad rap, because like literally we're just trying to be like, hey, so it matters that like so my research, Shakespeare, a little bit of context, I analyzed representations of minor characters in Shakespeare. So I was looking at servants, messengers, like anonymous characters in relation to like Hamlet and Othello and all of these big name guys. And literally like my joke tagline for my dissertation was treat others the way you want to be treated. Because, hey, guess what? Nobody treats minor characters well. So my dissertation was basically trying to argue that like these characters are important for our understanding of why Hamlet is the way he is, why Othello is the way he is, why like the worlds of Shakespeare's plays have influence, or like those characters have influence on the plays. And then, you know, if we want to expand that out to the world, we have a lot of movie genres and video games where people kill NPCs without thinking about it. If we start to examine that a little bit, what does that say about, you know, that narrative or that video game or that, you know, movie that we're watching? And that's, you know, that's the thing I was trying to argue. Do people agree with me? I don't know. I don't know if they do. But like my failure or my success was basically trying to convince people that that's legit.
Yeah, and then I guess on my end, like this is where you get kind of that quantitative qualitative split, where on the quantitative side, like it's maybe not like a failure per se, but you can run the regression and keep the null hypothesis. Like you're not rejecting anything. Like it's like, oh, there's no statistically significant change here, which can feel like a disappointment. And I've had some really good stats classes here where they've talked about like you still found a thing. Like you're like, this is not the, you know, like this thing is not the case, and that's still contributing. But you still, you know, you want to find this new thing and have that discovery. And so I like some of those quantitative things. But again, I really like the qualitative side of things where I think it's, you know, it's more you might discover a thing in your interview that you hadn't planned for. And so like the study can really change. And so it's more about the adapting to what you're discovering, being responsive and attentive to those things that I find really, really, really interesting. And then, right, the challenge becomes I have this qualitative thing. How do I justify it to the larger academic world? That can be part of the challenge. But, yeah, and that specifically has been on my mind because I'm in a qualitative methods, advanced qualitative class this year. So I hope I did that class proud with that answer because, yeah, you can fail, I suppose, and a lot of it comes honestly in the writing of it. So much of the challenge with qualitative is I've got all these interviews and all of my codes. How do I condense that into 8,000 to 10,000 words for an article? Like that can be so hard to do, and the process of doing that with like the ethics and the care of how do you represent the people you did your interviews with is really, really hard. But yeah, like if your discipline's all about that original discovery, I would feel a lot of pressure with that. And especially if 9 times out of 10 you're not going to get what you want, or you got to change the variables or discover them on your own, that's not the group of problems I would want to have.
I guess it's really interesting to think about like the research I did in the humanities in terms of variables. Like I think my variables were characters, they were agency of characters, and it was like what kind of status within the play did these characters have, and like that triangulation I was able to make an argument, which is pretty cool to think about. I don't think my advisor would ever think about it that way, but that's pretty cool to think about. So we're starting to get into a conversation about writing, and I think for Nolan and I, like we're really interested to hear how you think about writing. Like how much writing do you normally do in a week or a semester? And we'll kind of ask you a few questions about this, but like what is your relationship to either writing academically or writing like non-academically?
Great question. So I think I'll preface it with just saying, when I heard originally this was a writing podcast, I was like, oh, interesting. I don't know that I'm the foremost expert on this, because I would consider myself still very much a novice writer.
Okay.
For a couple reasons. Number one, I haven't ever published a paper. I'm working on one now, wrapping up my master's, but this is essentially the first big research paper I've written. So I haven't been through the whole complete process where I've written it, I've gotten feedback, I've tried to get it published, I've succeeded or failed, I've written another one, et cetera, et cetera. And I think I'm still relatively early in my research career. So I think I can contribute my perspective on it as sort of I think maybe a novice writer. Might be if there's a way to put it, that might be it.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting to hear you say that, because I did listen to your 3-minute thesis competition presentation and I found it very expert. Like because we were talking about this before, but like you gave a really good sales pitch, and that is a skill that some writers don't have at the academic level, simply because like sometimes we're just not trained to pitch our projects. So can you tell me a little bit about like what the process of writing that presentation was?
Yeah, absolutely. The 3-minute thesis. Yeah, sure. So it started off. I started by trying to lay the groundwork of what should this contain, like what should I put in this, because like I said before, echo chamber, everything I do is I try to be technical. The experts that I work with do a really good job, like my PI do a really good job of saying, like, you should include this, you need more detail here, you need more detail there, et cetera, et cetera. But this, I had to do more research to take a zoomed out view on what is the big picture here and how do I communicate it in 3 minutes. So,
because those are kind of at odds. How do I zoom out really quick?
Exactly. Yeah, it's hard. It's not easy. So first things first, I sort of just wrote down what's the point, like why are we doing this. Then I thought about how would I explain this to my younger brother.
Nice.
Shout out Jackson. Listen to this, please. And then I thought about how do I mesh those? How do I explain it in a way that is accessible to people, but also that communicates like, no, there's actually like really technically important stuff going on here without explaining technically why it's important.
Yes. I'm smart, really, I swear.
Yeah. So for that, I had some really helpful resources that I was able to tap into. So some people in my laboratory helped me craft an overall idea, right? I talked with my PI a bit about it. I talked with students a bit about it. I used YouTube videos. YouTube videos are great.
Hell yeah.
We love YouTube here.
We love YouTube.
Yeah. So I was able to, formulate that more zoomed out view by taking advantage of, resources online, resources in person. My lab, my PI is great about focusing on the commercialization side of things. So I was fortunate to have that as sort of a background. Why are we doing these things in the lab, and how do they translate to potentially making a finished project?
Yeah.
Which has helped me from the start of my point in the lab have more of a zoomed out view. So those are a couple of the resources I took advantage of that helped me sort of plan that out. And then from there, it was just, practice. Yeah. Tell it to people. Does it make sense to them? Do I need to add this or change that?
Yeah. If you had to quantify how many drafts did you have?
Good question. So physical drafts that I put to paper, not a ton. Five.
That's a healthy amount. That's a healthy amount.
But in my head, I would run through.
It was a continuous process.
I would do things like I would record myself and, make tweaks or something like that. Okay. And then at the end of the process, I'd be like, okay, this is my draft from today because I recorded myself X number of times and then wound up at this.
Yeah.
So in my head, more than that, but on paper, 5-ish.
I say one thing I think that really highlights is like the things you hear in like a high school like English class or like a comms class where you have to give a speech or whatever. Like those things of like write it down, practice it out loud. Like getting into grad school, one of the things I think I realized like related to writing is like all those tools and tips and tricks that I had heard along the way, but maybe not put into practice because I was also a good student and I didn't need to all the time in undergrad. Like it makes the product at the end so much better. And so to hear that, like it was just always in your head and the thing you were working on, like that makes sense. And it's probably why you won, because it's so hard. And to have good practice like that is also hard to commit to it like that.
Yeah. Because I watched it again this morning as I was like prepping for this interview, and it really is impressive because you pause in really effective places. You gesticulate really well. Like you have a very approachable presentation style. And you're right. Like you're condensing really technical stuff down into a way that like your little brother, shout out Jackson, my mom would like the people that we care about but don't have the like background that we do would be able to understand what you're trying to convey. And that's awesome. That's so cool.
It's such a valuable skill that I think is overlooked in academia.
Yeah.
And so kind of coming off that, like, and I think it's important to also realize that writing can look like a lot of things for you. Like it could be the notes that you write at the end of a lab report, or just as you're keeping track of the research progress you're making. Like, what do you like about writing, or the writing you've done in your master's program, or just in the field in general? But also, I guess, what do you not like, or what do you find maybe a bit more challenging?
I'd say if I had to talk about the things that I like first, I guess from what I've done, the writing that I have done, it can be a satisfying way to sort of wrap things up, right? When I finally get, these results that I'm like, oh, these are positive results. We're turning in the right direction. Writing about it and summing up, that particular experiment.
That aha moment.
Yeah.
Which I have, I not incredibly far in my process, but I have done that at least for some things. That can help, make it feel like, oh, wow, I have done things and I have accomplished things. So that's I guess the positives that I feel when doing it. And then some of the challenges that come along with it are, one, like, the amount of detail is very important. And this is where I really try to lean on the people around me. And I'm fortunate to have people around me that can help with that because they know a lot. And I sometimes, it's challenging to write about a subject and you're like, this makes sense. I've included what I need to include. If someone was looking at this, they'd be like, oh, yeah, that checks out. But sometimes you forget technical details. And so it's good to have what helps, when I do that is someone to be like, no, this is bad, or this part of it should change, or you need to add this, or you need to go back and do those experiments. Because really, it's difficult to craft a whole cohesive view of what you're doing, why, and then supporting it with evidence and literature and, these technical explanations of what is actually happening in your experiment. So that's a big challenge for me, and one that I'm still trying to improve a lot at that.
It's a lifelong process. You are, I think there's always value in like acknowledging the things you're good at and acknowledging where you need to improve. But like you can always improve the things you're good at, and you can always improve everything else. So like I hear you. I actually kind of want to jump to skip a question because you've been talking about instructor, advisor feedback, so feedback from your PI. How do you navigate that feedback? Do you take it full cloth? Do you like take it piecemeal? Are you sometimes like, this is a dumb comment, smack?
I'd say I'm working on that. What I try to do always is take that feedback from the perspective of, this person is trying to help me. This person is trying to make me get better. And, there are plenty of instances in academia where that is or isn't true.
Yeah.
I think in my position, my PI is always trying to help at the end of the day. That helps me, take that feedback constructively, because a lot of times it's very good. It's very helpful. Sometimes you have to think deeply about what goal I'm trying to accomplish and how does my PI see that from a perspective of someone who's been in this field for a long time and who's an expert in this field. So everything that they say to me, I try to, take, okay, this is something I need to internalize. This is something I need to understand and, apply it. And that helps. And, a lot of times it's very straightforward. He's like, you need to do this. I'm like, okay, I'll go and do this. So I'd say that's what I have to say about that. And it also, I will add one thing, it depends on the role of your PI, I think. For me, I'm in a relatively larger lab. From my experience, him having to handle, 15, up to 15 some students, things get, from his perspective, more, broad picture kind of. He's got to orchestrate all these different moving pieces. Yeah. And so, compare that to someone with a small lab where it's just 2 students and that PI, they can be more zoomed in on the details.
Yeah. So it sounds like your PI is helpful, but kind of takes that very directive, it's not that he doesn't have time for you, but his time is split between 15 people. So yeah, I'm going to tell you need to do X, Y, Z. Hopefully you can go and do that on your own.
Well, and then on top of that, it's become pretty clear, there's a healthy lab there, a healthy culture in the lab. And it sounds like you're in a pretty good environment, or at least have good relationships with the people over you and around you. And I think that's really valuable. And yeah, because I just know I have friends who tell me about things in their department. I'm like, wow, I would not want to navigate those challenges. I don't have a lab, but my department culture is very healthy. It's very collaborative and collegial. Everyone is there to help one another. And so yeah, when you get those comments, it's okay, you're trying to help me, not criticize me, even if that means I can improve, right? And so being able to navigate that is, I think, a lot of people have a hard time learning. Yeah. And I think it's influenced by your environment.
Yeah, that foundation of trust is really essential. So we're getting to the end of our episode. So, Quentin, I think we really just have a couple more questions for you. And these are hopefully questions that you can answer basically directly to our audience. These, we want graduate students at KU to think about their paths, think about their research in a healthy way. So for you, do you have a philosophy of writing, and how do you, or even research, how do you think about research either in the world or in your life?
I would say, in terms of writing, I don't think I have a personal philosophy.
Hell yeah!
If I had to define one personal philosophy, I don't think I could.
Beautiful, love it.
And I'm still working on that. I'm still getting better at that. Research, definitely.
Okay.
A few of them, but the biggest one is it's troubleshooting. That's the biggest skill. Again, disclaimer, engineering perspective. It's a lot of problem solving, and a good way to think about problem solving is your troubleshooting. What is going to give me trouble today, and how do I fix it? Is a mindset you have to have coming into the lab space. What is my goal? What am I trying to accomplish? And what is going to impede that progress? And how do I get around it? Do I look in the literature? Do I enlist someone else from the lab? Do I read the manual? Do I ask a colleague? So, yeah. And I've had people say that to me. I've had people, use the word troubleshooting, and, they did. And I was like, oh, that's a really, succinct way to put it.
Yeah. Life is kind of just about troubleshooting.
That's pretty applicable advice. I think that's good stuff.
Also, writing is about troubleshooting. So your philosophy applies.
On track.
I have a personal philosophy for writing.
Wonderful. And then, of course, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would either tell your old self before you went to grad school, so that, maybe young master's students currently in the throes of it can take that with them?
Good question. Okay, let's think here. Number 1, have a reason. I said that
have
before.
A reason.
I think
yeah.
that's the biggest one.
We'll reiterate that. Have a reason.
Just hammer that home. Number 1, have a reason. Number 2 is always a good time to just think and kind of expose yourself to options after graduate school. And I think I did an okay job of this. I went through the whole PhD search thing. as well as at the beginning of my master's, I explored industry options a little bit. But it's never a bad idea to do those things. And it's, something that made that hard for me to get started on. Sometimes it seemed so daunting. It seemed like a daunting task. And something I tell myself is just put yourself out there. Mm-hmm. Just do a little bit of research in your spare time. Like, send someone an email.
Yeah.
It's, it can feel like, for me, it was like, well, this person is such and such at, X university. Mm-hmm. It can seem daunting. And, it's just like, well, just send them an email.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just see if they want to talk. That's point number 2 is just, you just have that in mind. And then point number 3, going into graduate school. Things will work themselves out. Things will be okay. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people that are applying to graduate school, you're doing so for your own reasons, but at the end of the day, you have something clearly to bring to the table, right? Mm-hmm, you're through one way or another, you have something that could contribute to grad school, and that means in life you can also find ways to apply that. So sometimes I'll feel like I'm lagging behind or I'm slowing down, and it's good. I try to remind myself, at least, I think it's true, that I things will be okay, and I will have options during, after graduate school, no matter how that goes.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Like, we always have something to bring to the table, no matter where we go and what we do. And if it feels scary, like, just know that somebody will take you. You'll get accepted. You'll get the job. It'll be fine.
And we just put so much pressure on ourselves, like in grad school, especially, and like people can have a lot riding on that, like for their own like esteem and how they view themselves. But like, it's okay. Like, you have your reason for doing things. Trust in the reason that you have. And I think things will work out one way or another. And being okay with that, I think, is a really positive message. So I think that's all really wonderful.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Those are great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
It was
this
wonderful,
has been an excellent conversation. Really interesting. Hopefully you got something out of it as well.
I did. I absolutely did. Thank you both for having me on. It's been really cool to talk to you. First podcast down.
Yeah.
Maybe
end of the year. It's a really good episode. Yeah.
Well, Quentin, thanks again for being on the show. To our listeners, this will be the last episode of the spring 2024 semester. We will...
One academic year down.
One academic year down. Can you believe it? We're 1 year old. A baby.
We're toddling.
We're toddling out into the world. We plan on having a couple of episodes in the summer, barring, recording.
So stay tuned.
Just stay tuned. We miss you. We love you. And happy writing, y'all.
Happy writing.